Doesn't work. How about this one? No. This should be this microphone.
Yeah. All those technicalities, you know. Shall we start? All right. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to welcome you on behalf of the Institute of Public Affairs to the panel discussion, which will focus on telework. The title of the panel discussion is Paradoxes and Illusions of Telework. We are in 2024, which is the fourth year just after the outbreak of the pandemic, during which telework entered in our daily lives, the world of work, and also our daily lives. So we already have gathered some reflections on how telework operates in Europe. So we will have the opportunity today to discuss some of the research results that we produced under the TWINK project. This debate is conducted within the TWINK project, which encompasses several countries, meaning Portugal, Spain, Austria, Poland, and Finland. So we will have the opportunity today to hear a little bit about the first conclusions from this international comparative study, and we also have guests that will relate to our results, but also discuss their experiences on telework across Europe. So once again, warm welcome to our discussion. Warm welcome to those that sit here in the premises of Institute of Public Affairs, and also I wanted to welcome those that join us online. Pozwólcie mi Państwo też powiedzieć parę słów w języku.
Let me now say a couple of words in Polish, as it is a seminar that's being interpreted also into Polish. Let me welcome all of the participants of this meeting. We will focus on telework, on remote work today. The title of our discussion panel is Paradoxes and Illusions of Telework, and it's already 2024, so yet another year after the outbreak of the pandemic. Pandemic sort of forced us to work remotely, and at least some of the workers online had to switch to this working mode. Now we know much more about telework and its impact on our lives, also thanks to the TWINK project, which is the occasion for our meeting today. So today at our discussion panel, we will briefly present the key conclusions from the project. We will also confront our conclusions with the representatives of trade unions and the representative of the EU OSHA agency. So I would like to invite you to participate actively in our discussion, both you who are here with me on site and those of you who are with us online. So now over to Pablo Sanz, who will tell us a couple of words about the key conclusions from the twin projects. Over to you, Pablo.
Many thanks, Dominic, for this kind presentation. Can you please confirm that you are listening to me well? Yes? Okay, great. Many thanks. So following the agenda, I'm going to make a very brief presentation of the project. I will be very brief, as agreed with Dominic, who is organizing the panel, because the idea is to be able to have more time for the panelists and for the joint discussion. So as Dominic highlighted, we are implementing this European project, which is funded by the European Commission, Twin Project, which is covering 6 countries, Portugal, Spain, Estonia and Poland, Austria and Finland. And we are also covering or focusing on 4 different sectors: financial sector, chemical sector, ICT sector, and public sector. What are the main goals, the main research objectives of our projects? So we are focusing, of course, on telework, as you can anticipate on the basis of the title of the conference, of the panel. Basically, we want to address 3 main research objectives. First, we want to know, to analyze what are the main views of trade unions and employer organizations in different countries and sectors about telework. So how do they frame the different benefits and risks of telework, assuming that the perception have radically changed since the outbreak of the pandemic crisis. Secondly, we want to analyze what are the collective responses towards telework. So how social partners at different levels in the 6 countries and 4 sectors covering are regulating telework through collective bargaining, multi-employer, sectoral, company collective bargaining, or other social dialogue practices. And finally, we would like to know if it is possible to identify some good practices that can be transferred to different contexts. So which lessons can we learn about different collective responses towards telework? So yes, so far we started in October 2023 the project. We started with desk research. Now in our project website, which I invite you to consult, you can identify the report of the second work package, which was devoted to desk research. We have comparative desk research report, and we also have 6 national reports. Currently, we are finishing the phase of the field work. We have conducted 24 interviews in each country with social partners at different levels, and we are also conducting mini case studies identifying good practices of regulation of telework at company level. All these findings will be also published in the website. So just to finalize, I will explain you very briefly what are being the main results. So basically, we see that telework is well interiorized in the discourses of the social partners. We conducted a similar project also funded by the European Commission some years ago, the view, and we can really identify a big difference in the discourses. Currently, trade unions, employer organizations are very aware about the benefits, but also about the risk of telework. Moreover, they know that telework is currently a demand for workers, and also that companies are more favorable to provide telework after the outbreak of the pandemic crisis. Nevertheless, we see that telework is not a priority in the regulation of collective bargaining. It's curious, but we have identified when we compare the 6 countries and the different sectors that telework is barely regulated at multi-employer or sectoral collective bargaining. Of course, there are some cross-country differences. For instance, if in Eastern European countries, Estonia and Poland, there is basically no sectoral collective bargaining, so telework is not regulated at this level. However, in countries such as Austria or Finland or even Spain and Portugal, where the prevalence of multi-employer bargaining is very high, telework is only regulated on a very general level. So only there are basic provisions. So also in these countries, collective bargaining is mainly regulated at company level or at an individual basis. And at the same time, we can also identify that basically social partners at this time are addressing very specific topics which are of high concern for them. For instance, in most of the countries, the main topic discussed through collective bargaining is about pay and compensation. This is a critical issue for trade unions. However, we see that there are still some issues which, although the social partners are aware that should be dealt with collective bargaining, they are still not managing to address them through collective bargaining. For instance, occupational health and safety, for instance, conditions for getting access to telework, preventing inequality, etc. Of course, there are also cross-country differences. We are also identifying interesting results or impacts of statutory legislation. For instance, in Poland, we have identified that recent legislation, which is encouraging a more active role to be played by trade unions and company level, is producing some positive outcomes. So trade unions are currently having more capacity to negotiate telework arrangement at company level. So this is also a positive result that we have identified. So that's all from my side. These are still preliminary results. Hopefully in 1 month we will publish the report summarizing key findings from fieldwork. In September, we will also publish the final report, and September, October, we will organize a final conference to present final findings, probably in Madrid. So many thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoyed this very interesting panel session. And again, many thanks for hosting and organizing this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. And I would also like to wish you all welcome, online and offline, to our panel discussion. My name is Sanna Saksala-Bergholm. I'm from the University of Jyväskylä. And now I would like to warmly welcome our panel discussions here. First up, we have Nuno Boabida, who is from Nova Universidade Lisboa, affiliated at Notus. Welcome. And we have online Philip Brooks from Chamber of Labour from Vienna. Welcome. We have Maurizio Curtarelli from EU OSHA. Welcome, Maurizio.
Hello, good morning. Thank you.
And we have Paulina Baranska from Union Solidarność. Welcome.
Good morning.
So as you all saw this very promising title of our session, so we are all at this stage very familiar about teleworking. And during COVID-19, we saw the profits and benefits of what telework can bring for us. But however, now it's time to reconsider some questions, what it really means for us, such as what can be done to make the most of these benefits, what can be done in terms of public policies, and what is the role of the social partners. Therefore, I would like to open the discussion by asking a more general one heard in the current telework arrangement, in general business objectives, for example, or is this workers' interests like work-life balance, or are we talking both aspects? How do you find this? Paulina.
Okay, can you hear me well, or shall I switch this on?
I can hear you, but... Okay. No.
Okay, so thank you for asking this very good question. I can only speak for the Polish context. I mean, as a person involved in negotiating occupational safety and health, in the Polish social dialogue, trade unions have a huge asymmetry in power to the detriment of the trade unions. And current regulations of telework include only the point of views of business and government, The trade union interests have not been included at all. We have, as trade unions, proposed our positions when we were consulting the draft regulations, and none of them were included in the new regulations. And this is mainly on the occupational safety and health. Propositions of trade unions weren't included. Currently, the regulations placed the entire responsibility for occupational safety and health on the worker. Employers are excluded from this obligation in remote work, and only enterprises with trade unions, workplace trade unions, can negotiate, well, workers in these enterprises can negotiate collective agreements where the employers would compensate for the equipment, ergonomic equipment in telework. But we haven't heard of a case where an employer would have concluded such an agreement with a trade union. So the situation is rather poor in Poland in this regard.
Thank you, Polina. I'm looking forward to hear more about more specific cases. Switch off. Okay, sorry for the technical. So thank you, Polina, for this opening, and I'm looking forward to hear some comparative aspects from other countries. Would you like to, Nuno, continue?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your interesting question. It is very difficult to have a wide European view on telework and its outcomes. But I would start with my country, Portugal. I think there was a fairly balanced stroke between the government, employers, associations, and work. They tried to come up with legislation that both protected workers during the pandemic, naturally, and after the pandemic, maintaining some dignity and some safety in their teleworking. However, after these short to medium term, new measures are being needed. We have reports of many physical problems arising from teleworkers, ergonomic problems, as well as mental disorders arising with this work. It is true that most companies reduced full-time teleworker to hybrid modes, and this to a certain extent leveled a little bit the field. Nevertheless, more measures are now in need, and this is somehow different according to some areas of the economy, but to a certain extent, that's as an expert, that's what I feel in Portugal. Looking into a wider European perspective, my idea is that all countries made their efforts to strike a balance in their regulations. Everything was very experimental in the beginning of COVID-19. After a while, the legislation tend to be more mature, you could say, and to a certain extent, more work needs to be done at the European level. Probably the Parliament could have an initiative in the following months or years. I think it's needed, particularly in terms of, as my previous colleague, Dr. Paulina, mentioned, at health and safety problems, as well as inequalities that arise from telework, and at probably more harmonized legislation in Europe to a certain extent. So that would be my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nuno. And I would like now to continue with Filip. Are you online?
Jestem, dzień dobry. Słychać mnie?
Hello, I am online. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Super, bardzo dziękuję za zaproszenie i za...
Thank you very much for having me here and for being able to speak in Polish. This is my mother tongue, so I'm really happy that I can speak about my work in Polish. So I would like to apologize if not all of the vocabulary I use is correct, but I'll try my best. So the situation is a bit paradoxical. And when telework was introduced at a large scale during the pandemic, there was a paradox. The interests of workers and employers were almost identical. Everyone was really willing to keep working, to keep the businesses going, to keep the level of infections low as possible during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there was a common cause and there were common interests. And anyone who knows how a workplace works, it was quite a paradox. But we all knew, and we've heard this today, that it is an illusion to believe that the situation will remain so. In Austria, when this paradox happened, and when the remote working became the common cause, the Austrian government decided that anything related to telework would be decided between the social partners. And that includes us, the trade unions, but also that includes the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe today I will be able to tell you more about the labor law in Austria. This is quite unique. After World War II, all regulations relating to labor law is not created by the government. It is created between these two opposing sides, the Chamber of Labor and the Chamber of Commerce, business. So also in this area of telework, it was the social partners who negotiated the law. Of course, the law was later on passed by the parliament, but it was the opportunity for the partners to establish and all the rules and regulations relating to telework within a single act of law. And therefore, there is a lot of acceptance in Austria for telework, even though this huge amount of workload of telework that happened during the pandemic is actually declining. But the culture of labor in Austria is such that the employer wants to see their employees at work, wants to see them at their desks, and only then they are sure they actually work. And so only recently the contactless card system has been implemented, because Austrians believed that when I don't have to key in the PIN code, then it's not a payment at all. So this is quite funny. So more and more interests of businesses are being represented at the workplace. When the pandemic struck, the energy crisis struck actually, and the companies didn't want to pay a lot for energy, didn't want to pay a lot for gas. And that's why the businesses asked people to work from their homes, because it's them then who had to pay the utility bills. So we can see that in the end, it's the employer decides who can work remotely and also on what conditions they can work. And that means that the employer's interests are favored in this respect. And we need to do something about it to eliminate this inconsistency and this inequality of interests. I hope I managed to express my thoughts in a comprehensive way.
Yes, thank you very much, Philip. This was a very comprehensive answer, indeed. Actually, you mentioned in your nice introduction that the employers need to have the employee in the office to be sure that they're really making their work. And finally, that the end is that the employer is the one who decides about telework working conditions. So we can go on for our next questions, which is nevertheless not easy to answer, but I hope you can reflect over. Excuse me, I'm jumping. Mauricio, my deepest apologies that I missed you.
Thank you. Not a problem, don't worry.
I'm not an expert moderator, I'm a researcher. You can see this.
Don't worry, not a problem. So
please,
I wish,
Mauricio,
first of all, to thank you for the invitation to this panel, which is a great opportunity as well to make, let's say, a point about what is happening in the area of telework that we at UOSHA have been studying since inception of the pandemic and also earlier than that. And we are still working on. It will actually be one of the priority areas of our ongoing campaign on digital technologies at work. We will cover more than only telework. We will refer to remote and hybrid work because we think that this is more what is happening. We could see a spike in telework, working from home before the pandemic. Nowadays, hybrid forms of work are more probably most common. I was checking data from Eurostat, and I would like to share a slide with you, if I may. Okay, so you can see in this slide how, can you see it?
Yes.
So you see in this slide how telework was a marginal phenomenon until the pandemic. There was this massive increase, but now these are the most recent data actually to 2022. They started a decline in telework meant as working from home. Now, why is that? I mentioned that one of the things is that basically new forms of hybrid work, like going to the office a couple of times a week or once a week, is or the other way around, like staying at home like a couple of days a week and going to the office the rest of the time, is becoming the new sorry for that. So we see that this is what is happening. These hybrid forms of work are becoming more and more common. But why is that? There could be like push and pull forces. Probably, as it was mentioned earlier, there is a pull force from the employers that want to have their employees in the office to be able to manage them or control them in a more closer way. There could be also a sort of dissatisfaction and lack of motivation from the worker side. But all in all, I think that something didn't work properly, and I think it's legitimate to ask a number of questions like where the employer is able to develop, let's say, remote managing of remote workforce during the pandemic and after, where the employer is able to inform and train their employees about the risks, for example, that are at stake when working from home. This is the type of questions that I think need an answer. I would like to connect to what Paulina was mentioning earlier. In the area of OSH, health and safety is actually an area that it's already quite regulated for teleworkers. We know, for example, that and let me share with you maybe this slide. In general, teleworkers. Sorry. Yeah, this is it. Okay. So it's important to mention that the employers have the same health and safety responsibility for home-based teleworkers as for any other workers, for the employees that are working in the premises of the teleworker. This comes, so the framework, OSH Framework Directive 391 is the one, and the Daughters Directive are those that apply also to teleworkers. So this implies that employers have a range of obligations in the area of OSH regarding teleworkers. One of them is also to carry out a risk assessment of home-based, let's say, workplaces. This is not what happened and is not happening. And I think that we should ask why and how to make sure that these existing regulations are enforced in the post-pandemic world. So I think that this is the situation where we are now. We need to reflect as well on the things that maybe cannot be regulated, how can be like creating a culture of trust in which the employers are trusting that the employees from working from remote are actually doing their work. And based on that, we should reflect on what is needed, what is still missing in the general framework. So thanks for, thank you.
Thank you, Maurizio. Yes, Nuno, please.
Can you hear me, Mauricio?
Yes.
Just a brief question. By any chance, do you have a figure by age cohort? Because the employed people, in terms of the younger generations or the older generations, would have different interests regarding telework when compared to, say, for example, middle age with grown-up kids.
Yes, I mean, I have to dig into the Eurostat website more thoroughly. I don't know if they have this figure available by age. But yeah, I get your question perfectly, because obviously those with family responsibilities might be more, let's say, likely to request teleworking and being as well in jobs where telework is feasible, because there is also a feasibility issue about telework. Not all the jobs are teleworkable, let's say this way. The Joint Research Center of the European Commission estimated that only up to 37% of jobs can be teleworkable. We are now working on a project about the use of new technology to expand telework also beyond the desk-based, let's say, jobs. For example, the use of virtual reality or augmented reality that could allow workers in the manufacturing sector, for example, to carry out some tasks or part of their job from a remote location. So, yeah. But definitely the age dimension is an important one to reflect on the extent of telework across cohorts of workers.
Thank you, Mauricio.
Thank you. And Polina?
Thank you. Mauricio, thank you for reminding this OSH aspect and social dialogue. I would like to mention something that I've perhaps forgot. In the European social dialogue, we can also see a huge imbalance of power on telework between employers and workers. I just would like to remind negotiations on telework and the right to disconnect, on a draft directive on telework and the right to disconnect, that were broken unilaterally by employers in end of November 2023, where employers literally left the table in the European social dialogue. Business Europe refused to negotiate any draft directive on telework and the right to disconnect of workers. Thank you.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm aware of that. Yes.
Thank you. Is Philippe, would you like to comment here? Otherwise, we move to the next question. Okay. Actually, to go in line with this, with kind of OSH issues, I would like to know what kinds of long-term consequences can telework have for a company and worker. For example, if you think about the productivity of work or the well-being of workers. Would any one of you like to start? Perhaps we give the voice now to Maurizio or Philippe, who kindly have waited for.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, it's difficult to say what will happen in the long term, and because there are no the time span, it's not long enough to make some considerations or to make forecasts towards the future. But what we saw from our survey, the OSH pools, is that, for example, some evidence points at the fact that there are like several issues related to telework workers. Teleworkers report more frequently problems of musculoskeletal problems or headaches or eye strain more than the average of the other workers. Also, in terms of psychosocial risks and mental health outcomes, it's worth to mention that teleworkers are in some of the, let's say, variables that we have surveyed in a worse position compared to other workers. So if things do not change, if there is not a change in the way telework is managed and including the right to disconnect, to avoid long working hours, and the conflict of personal and private life, then we can only infer that in the future things will be, for the long term, will not be better for workers. We will have a new round of the OSH pools next year, 2025. We will ask the same questions to teleworkers, and we will see what is the trend. It will be interesting at some point next year to present this data and to start seeing what's the trend of the impact of telework in terms of health on workers, in terms of motivation, in terms of mental health.
Thank you. Did I got you right? You have already published for the last year similar publication that you will publish in 2025.
It's a survey. It's a survey that we carried out in 2022, and we will repeat next year, 2025, with questions to a number of types of workers, including teleworkers, and we asked as well about health outcomes, psychosocial risks, mental health, so on and so forth. So we will establish probably a trend. We will see if the telework will be growing in our survey, if the impact on the workers will be changing, or will be these trends will be consolidated over the time.
Good. I'm sure these are very important, not on a union level, but also at the company level. We will need this kind of information more. Philip, would you like to continue?
Bardzo chętnie.
With pleasure. In my opinion, we do not need to wait long to see what long-term consequences telework has on the labor market. So the crisis situation and the feeling that the interests are balanced, it's in the past. It was a year ago. The government in Austria is preparing to implement the act of law, which is enacted during the pandemic, and it will also review what elements of the law work well, which of them do not work well, and which need to be amended. So there is a law amendment planned. So an evaluation was conducted all over Austria. And the government wanted to establish in what way employees and employers who moved to hybrid work or remote work assess it. Roughly 60% of workers with a child prefer to take their laptop home and work from them rather than take a sick leave when their child is sick and simply stay on a sick leave. And 50% of people who previously, before the pandemic, simply went to a doctor and took a sick leave, now prefer to take their laptop home and work from home in spite of the sickness. 55% of people say now that they work long hours at home, hours that they wouldn't work from the company's premises. Also, employers expect employees to be available at a time that they wouldn't normally be available if they worked from the office. So it's called the so-called workation. You take your laptop away with you on vacation and you do your work. And of course, you do not have unlimited time of paid holiday. So this workation is growing right now. There are some monitoring systems in place, and the trade unions and the labor chamber do not know how these systems work. And more often, they are installed on your computers, and it measures, for example, how much time does it take you to answer a phone? How much time does it take you to answer an email? So previously, such systems, surveillance systems, only operated at large, gigantic companies like Amazon. Right now, they are being implemented at smaller companies. And who is paying for my work when I work from home 3 days a week? And the employer has the benefit of reducing the office space, and nobody is reimbursing me for any utility costs that I have to pay when I work from home. And Austria is going through an energy crisis, and it was affected by inflation to a lot of extent. Our reliance on Russian gas was really high. Also, there were some problems with accidents at work when people worked remotely, and you had to really put up a fight with the National Health Fund to get any compensation for accident at work that happened when you were at home. So these fights are growing as well. In my opinion, this balance of interest is shifting and there is no equality anymore between the workers and the employers. So it's no use waiting 5 more years to see the long-term effects of remote work, because we are seeing the negative consequences when looking at Austrian workers right now.
Thank you. Thank you for your prompt answer. There are a lot of points we can come back to, but now I would like to leave the word for Nuno and Justin, Paulina.
Thank you very much, Sana. I'd like to say also a few words following what Philip just said. As far as I know, I admit my ignorance, the World Health Organization admits or recommends 1 hour per week of moderate physical activity for school children in school. That's more or less the indicator I have. If we translate this to a telework in the, I don't know, in their 30s or 40s, or later on in their 60s, I don't know what the indicator would be, but it would be very interesting to have a reference at least. So I'm not advocating for physical work or for physical movement and moderate physical activities, but what I'm saying is that for those who live and work in the same flat or apartment or house, they have to compensate with some other physical activity. And this debate, I don't see this debate, to be honest, at least in my country, Portugal. I don't know about the rest of the countries present here or in other countries, but there has to be a public debate, and everybody has to know, if I stay at home 5 days per week, how much time do I need to counterbalance with physical activities? This has to be more or less studied. And what I mean by this example is that, in my opinion, and where my knowledge reaches, is that there are no specific studies for teleworkers, no specific references for them, and this is very, very urgent. This is not in 5 years' time. I do admit that having a long time series is great. I'm not questioning that. What I'm saying is that there is urgency in agency in doing something about this, and the European level could be a good starting point. It goes the same about mental diseases, not just because it is also part of our contemporary public debate, being aware of mental diseases, but also because many workers stay at home, stay isolated, stay atomized, worked in very closed spaces. They don't contact as much with other human beings. All this is creating, or perhaps enrolling, a snowball that will have consequences for public health. Monitoring systems in place in trade unions. To be honest, I'm not sure if that's the best place to be. As we have seen here in these research projects, many trade unions appear to have difficulty dealing with this topic, telework. Of course, we can discuss skills, formation, what can we do with trade unions, but are they the ones who are really keen and have a direct interest on studying this topic and spreading the word, disseminating and creating a public debate about the consequences of telework. Not so sure about that. Perhaps health DG, health authority could be much more effective raising awareness and creating a debate inside of a company. I don't want to talk too much, but I think I said enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nuno. I think we have once again a lot of interesting points that we should take in consideration when we continue the panel discussion here. But before that, Paulina, could you kindly say your...
Perhaps I would like to start with the definition of telework, because I think we need to first start from the very beginning. The current definition we're using is that it's work enabled by new technologies, mobile technologies that allow remote working, whereas remote work is much more than that. It's a new way of organizing work in general, of organizing work tasks, of organizing personal relations at work, of organizing occupational safety and health. And this needs to be regulated because if it's not, we will have dire consequences for workers. And it's a pity because telework can provide a great level of autonomy to workers and work-life balance. Many studies have shown that remote workers, despite all the negative sides, still enjoy a better work-life balance than regular workers. Although there is another side of this coin, which is the blurred boundary between work and private life and working in leisure time, which needs to be regulated by the right to disconnect, of course. But it all depends on the trust and autonomy of the worker that is given by the employer in telework, which really enhances the benefits of this mode of working. We need to remember that many workers who have barriers to labour market, such as in rural areas or workers with disabilities, can really profit from remote working. But at this point, in terms of health consequences, I analysed the Eurofound European Working Conditions telephone survey, which is the latest one of 2021, in the differences between workers and teleworkers, full-time teleworkers and hybrid teleworkers, but only for the CE countries, for the Central Eastern European region. And what I observed is that teleworkers indeed enjoy a higher work-life balance compared to regular workers, but experience higher work pace, higher work demands in terms of quantity of demands and quality of job demands, qualitative job demands. And also they experience a higher incidence of migraines, teleworkers, than regular workers, of migraines, of back pain, of anxiety and job burnout. So we see that this area really needs concrete legal provisions so that workers are well protected in telework and can benefit from this mode of working as much as employers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Actually, you raised once again the term right to disconnect. And this is also something that Philip already raised earlier. So I can see it is a very relevant topic when we talk about teleworking. I would like to know, first of all, what Nuno, from a Portuguese perspective, finds this kind of term right to disconnect. How important is this in your context? And also shortly from Paulina and Philippe, how it looks in their countries. Marisol, I don't include because it's not a very relevant OSH question at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, the right to disconnect is a right that exists in Portugal. It is part of our public debate going on also in companies, trade unions, and employees associations. It's taking its time to be discussed. More and more, we find that people tend to respect the working hours, or even receive an email stating that this email was received out of the working office hours. So I think it's taking its time, and eventually we would see, hopefully, a positive outcome. It is a debate. It is supported by the main social forces and even political ones, and the government or the former government. And I think it is integrated in a wider debate of the other European member countries.
Thank you, Nuno. Paulina?
Odpowiem po polsku, to dotyczy dialogu.
So let me respond in Polish. When it comes to situation in Polish, it is strictly related to the condition of social dialogue. So the employers strongly maintain that the current rules are sufficient to ensure the right to disconnect because working hours are regulated by the law. So workers should have no problems with ceasing to work on the basis of the working hours regulations that are in place. However, we as trade unions are well aware of the fact that the changes regarding remote work require changes to the labor code as well. And we need regulations on the right to disconnect. The work that you do while working remotely is outside the physical boundaries of a specific workplace. As a result, there is this ongoing continuous connectivity. The work culture expects from the workers to be constantly available. As a result, workers are afraid of not being available. They know that the feedback may be negative, that they may need to face negative consequences at work just the next day. So we demand that the law be adjusted to the current reality of work from home.
Good, thank you so much. And now the same question to Philippe.
Sytuacja prawna jest troszkę paradoksalna.
The situation as regards the law in Austria is a little bit paradoxical because at the EU level, the right to disconnect already exists, right? But at the same time, we see that the working hours of full-time employees, Austria takes the first place in the Europe and has the shortest time of work in Europe when it comes to maintaining your health. Many workers also say that they work outside of the regular hours and not to mention the holiday time. So I am wondering what the legal regulation would look like, because from my perspective, well, we already have the legal rules in place. What is not working is the enforcement of the law. So it's not only about the enforcement of the rules on working hours, but also the payment of social insurance contributions and observing the rules on minimal pay. All of the chambers that monitor the observance of these rules are understaffed, given the scale of abuse that you can see in at the first glance all across the all sectors of the economy. We have already mentioned the importance of ergonomics during offline work. So 80% of remote workers say that issue of occupational health and safety doesn't play any role. Only 6% of workers told us that their employers actually monitors and controls the way in which they work from home, whether they have an appropriate chair or desk, or whether they work from the kitchen. So when it comes to the right to disconnect, we do have such a legal rule, but we need to do much more to protect workers from themselves, because it is in their hands to implement the culture and to either adapt to the expectations of the employers or to follow the law. On the other hand, we need to discipline the employers. In Austria, we have a lot of problems with layoffs. Every worker need to be able to prevent being laid off just for the simple reason that they don't want to be available in certain hours. We do not have such possibilities in Austria. We cannot protect workers from themselves. So I am very interested in seeing what the discussion at the EU level will look like in the future, because we have always believed that it's enough to have the law, but it's not so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. And before we go on with issues, occupational safety, health issues, I'd like to continue a few sentences with this right to disconnect, and just to mention something from the Nordic perspective, because in Finland we have a very strong legal protection, and also, yes, thank you, and also the current act, for example, the act of time, working time is very protective on the side on employee. So I was very surprised to hear from both employer and employee unions that the topic right to disconnect is not very relevant in Finland, because it's so different from, for example, North American working rules, where it is a big topic. So just to show you that this is very diverse compared from Southern Europe and Northern Europe, for example. Now I'd like to turn the attention to the
microphone, please.
Sorry. For the occupational health and the health topics, and ask Maurizio what kind of measures are done for in the future. You mentioned the survey about you are currently doing, you have been doing, and it showed that there are a lot of mental and physical problems coming up. So I wonder if do you in OSHA made recommendations for industrial sectors or for companies, and do you also make any recommendation at legislative level?
Yes, thank you. I would like also to reconnect to what Nuno was mentioning before about who could have the role of actually raising awareness or informing about the risks of telework. And I wanted to just say that we are in that position. What we have been doing over the last few years was not only producing more knowledge about telework and the risks and the opportunities as well that telework can provide, but also we have been formulating tools for the workers, the employers, on how to prevent or manage OSH risks related to telework. So we were talking about the physical inactivity of teleworkers. We have prepared like specific tools that can be downloaded from our website on what is the right, let's say, moment for a break and what can be done during the break to make sure that, the sedentarism is not really a big issue for teleworkers and so on. And the same for how to, let's say, break the isolation of the teleworker. What can employers do and what workers can do to get out from this isolation that has a so strong toll in terms of mental health of the teleworker. So we have produced all these tools. We have produced also, I was mentioning that risk assessment is something that it's mandatory by law for the employers, and this should cover as well home-based workplaces. This is not happening because there are like implicit problems. For example, accessing the home of the teleworker is a problem. It's not a problem when there is a trust established between the teleworker and the employer, but it is a problem in general. So how to make sure that the worker collaborates to carry out a proper risk assessment and check the ergonomics of your workstation, for example. We have produced as well there a number of tools for employers to carry out this risk assessment, including an OIRA tool, online interactive risk assessment tool that can be accessed to carry out the risk assessment from online and for all teleworkers. And I would also like to mention that the campaign that I mentioned at the beginning, we included already telework in the previous campaign on musculoskeletal disorders. Telework will be again one of the priority areas in the next upcoming campaign. So we will be talking of telework and hybrid work from October onwards for 4 months through events, dissemination of materials, etc., that it's anyway available already on our website, can be downloaded for free and disseminated. So obviously, we rely on our network of national agencies and national authorities, etc., and we would invite everybody that has an interest in this topic to disseminate our materials to make sure that both employers and workers can do their part in promoting a healthy and safe telework. That is the idea. And one more point about the studies. Yes, I agree that obviously the information is not enough on telework and on the impact in terms of health and safety. To carry out a survey at European level is an important investment for an agency. Nevertheless, there are already, and Paulina mentioned the European Working Conditions Survey, I mentioned the OSHPUL survey, the Labor Force survey, are already sources that are available and contain some information on telework that could be of help to understand better, the phenomenon. Something specific on teleworkers doesn't exist at the moment. It would be interesting to pull together forces to have a specific survey on teleworkers. Definitely, this could be done. We could start discussing this, and I think that several actors are interested in having like this kind of tool. So yeah, I think that. Thank you. This was my points.
Thank you, Maurizio. I was wondering if, this is just a reflection based on what you just talked. So should a national occupational health and safety institution have more power on regulation or diverse kinds of health and safety regulation regarding teleworking? Mm-hmm. Or how do you collaborate currently with member states, health and safety?
Yes, definitely. We don't have obviously a regulatory power, and we can advise and request, for example, the Commission on specific topics, and we provide knowledge and let's say policy pointers and other indications that could be taken on board by national authorities that have the power to implement regulation and to introduce new legislation on specific topics. So we have more, let's say, soft power, I would say, or advisory role, and produce the information. We pull together the actors to promote exchange of information among all of them at national level. the circulation of good practices as an important aspect. So good pieces of legislation are sometimes, let's say, a snapshot. We take a snapshot on them and we propose them as good practices. And we start circulating them among all the actors to make sure that it could be inspirational for others as well. So this is unfortunately limited mandate that we have.
Yes, I see. But you are still doing very important jobs, even you are talking about soft power. Good.
Thank you.
I think we can move on to our next topic. And I would like to keep a more futuristic scope here and think how this will look in the future when we're talking about telework arrangement. Therefore, I would like to ask you, how can telework arrangements influence the recruitment of workers in the futures? For example, does it mean that no need for local workers, but for global talents? From the point of view employer and company, and on the other hand, from the employee and employee unions. Perhaps we can give the floor now on our audience here and participants. Perhaps Paulina, would you be able to say something?
I think that tapping into the global talent is an advantage to employers, of course. Sometimes it can be an advantage to the worker, because a worker can have this freedom to work boundaryless. However, there is a danger to collective bargaining, definitely, in such a global workforce, because workers are dispersed, individualized. They have no platform where they can unionize, organize, and this is a threat to wages and working conditions of such workers.
Right, thank you. So, who would like to continue? No?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Sana. I fully agree with Dr. Paulina just said. Indeed, it is a great advantage for companies and a great threat for the labor movement, the organized labor movement, and also a threat to workers at the personal level. So first of all, companies. It is obvious that you can tap into global talent and have better human resources, cheaper workers, perhaps less legal boundaries, very workable or very teleworkable teams, even teams around the world at the same time during 24 hours. This already happens in the mold industry, for example, whereas the localized Chinese workers work with Portuguese workers, Brazilian workers, Australian workers, and so on. This happens for more than a decade. But at this scale and what I'm seeing, I mean, I don't have any statistics about it, but what I've seen and the workers that I interviewed, IT, engineers, highly skilled, this type of digital nomads, this type of people, this type of workers, it is very frightening. I can give you an example that printing of money in Portugal is being done by very young engineers, and they can barely have them for more than 2 years. Why? Because they cannot, it's a public service, they cannot pay more than a prime minister, and there's countries all around the world ready to pay 3 to 4 times what they earn in my country. This is also a brain drain. We have people living in Portugal, but actually working outside. The tax system is also very confusing, to say the least, but it's very useful for companies. To trade unions, I think it's an even bigger challenge because it reduces the pool of membership they can have. This type of workers that I'm talking about, highly skilled workers, are not traditionally, but also especially now, are not very recruitable. They will have a less and less pool of potential members, and this is very difficult to counteract. Global TUs, I'm very skeptical about that for many reasons that I don't have time to explain here. And for these workers that work abroad, and they are not just highly skilled, some of them do very repetitive service-based functions. They face a lot of threats. It's not just the ones that we immediately come up to our minds, such as being atomized and away from any trade union or collective representation, or being very isolated and subject to physical and mental illness. They can be also related to working for companies who don't pay. This is very common in this type of work, or they pay much less, or they are in competition with other countries where this type of labor force is very cheap, and so on and on. They still have to pay their taxes where they work, their health insurance, and so on. So, in my opinion, this is a very bleak, dark future for labor, perhaps a very rising field for global capitalism.
Thank you for this less optimistic view. However, I hope that we have some optimistic view, perhaps Philip or Maurizio.
Bardzo chętnie.
Pleasure. I've been optimistic, and I believe that the scale of threats and the scale of reducing the demand for local talent and increasing the need for global talent is not that great. So the scale is not that great, and it's not a reason for my concern right now. So we examined the market after the telework was introduced, and only 12 employers declare that they have more and more remote workers abroad. So it's 12 years, and it's data from the past 3 years, so it can change. However, I can see some threats here, and the threat is not for the local workers looking for job. It's for the people who already are employed at the companies that offer remote working at a larger scale. And we are seeing that large companies employing more than 200 people, only 60 to 80 people have the possibility to work at the company's premises, at the offices. So the companies are reducing office space. So people who in the past did not have their own office, but they had their desk, now they no longer have that desk because there is the so-called desk sharing. And it's very burdensome, especially for people whose situation, circumstances are changing. And the circumstances are changing because, for example, they established a family or they move to a different location. And for example, let's imagine they have no place from which they could work remotely. And now the employer doesn't offer them even a desk. And this is a huge problem. Also, for employers, this is not all beneficial. If they only have remote workers and if they only have remote workers from abroad, that means the people will not be loyal to the company. They will not be loyal to the brand they work for. And when I say people, I mean here the worker. So this massive movement of moving people to their homes from the offices is not always beneficial. Whatever Paulina said, I fully agree with that and I fully support that. I think it's detrimental to trade unions and to collective agreements. And I believe there should be a directive also protecting people that work via platforms. But so this directive can, of course, help to some extent, but it's up to the individual countries to implement it. However, I am still optimistic that I believe that no need for local workers will not be a trend that will prevail in the future, and it's not as bad as it looks now.
Thank you, Philip. Mauricio, would you like to add in this question something from the point of view about what it means for our health and well-being?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, without getting into the specific topics of tax, let's say savings, etc., I would just like to raise the attention on the fact that there are problems of limited applicability or non-possibility of applicable the OSH framework when teleworkers are based in another country. Because obviously they are covered by the OSH regulation of that country, and this is obviously even a bigger problem if the workers are outside the European Union. So this is the type of let's say there would be needed a reflection because I think that labor inspectors would have something to say when seeing that a company of 200 people have let's say 100 people working from abroad being employees of that company, because obviously they are outside the country, different regulation apply, the fiscal residency is obviously involves the fact that they should pay taxes abroad, so on and so forth. So when thinking about the future and the possibility of getting workers from this huge talent pool that is like outside there, well, these are problems that are real and concrete and should be obviously taken into account and reflect upon when making any kind of future let's say forecast on telework from abroad.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. I think this is a very broad topic that we still keep on talking for several hours, but I think we soon have to open the floor for the audience and for possible audience who are online. Therefore, I will now pose the final question for our participants here, and therefore I'd like to know, finally, is there a need for a collectively regulated telework arrangements? And if yes, why or why not? Thank you. Paulina?
Well, I think this is a core requirement that telework is collectively regulated. However, we would rather welcome general regulation that would apply also to workers who are not non-unionized and not covered by collective agreements. Of course, we can collectively bargain on terms and conditions of telework. And we would welcome this opportunity. However, these regulations need to apply to all workers. We know that telework is often regulated by some non-standard forms of employment, which are not even covered by labor code, for example, in Poland, by civil code contracts. And we would like some general regulations on telework that apply to all workers alike.
Thank you, Paulina. Perhaps we can come back to this later on, and you can specify in your answer in case you want. But let's move on. Nuno.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very challenging question. To be honest, in my country, telework was barely regulated by collective agreements. Most companies just internalize the rules, and that's it. Is there a need for more? Well, you can always make the argument that democratic, industrial democracy should be applied also in the economy and thus regulate. But I have to call attention, at least to the ones present here, that not all countries in Europe have the same tradition of collective agreements. And so if employers in Portugal don't want to go beyond internal regulations in terms of telework, even if you decide so in Brussels, you're going to create a situation in my country that it's not bearable. So, I mean, if there is a need, I mean, I would agree so, but in practice, it won't work.
Nuno. Thank you, Nuno. I'm sorry if I was unspecific, but of course this does not mean that this is only a question at EU level. This could also be a sectoral level, a company level in your country. So is your answer the same, or would you like to specify something?
No, my question is exactly the same. We account for 10, 12 agreements, both at sectoral and company level, that agreed on topics related to telework. The state legislated in the labor code, and that's what people do. Further rules, each company does as they want in their internal rules. This is the way it worked out. If you come up with a directive or any other form of forcing collective bargaining or collective agreements, you would be creating a lot of conflicts. Just to give you an outside perspective from these Nordic Central European industrial relations systems, in other countries this could be a big problem, especially now that 10% of the Portuguese voted extreme right. We now have a country who's probably going to be governed by an alliance with the extreme right, and this type of things will not stick. Sorry for being so blunt, but just to be a bit real.
Thank you. No, it's good to be realistic. It's also not only an illusion, I mean, even the title says so. And I have to agree from a Nordic perspective that we are very much in the same lines as in Portugal, that we try to avoid these kind of regulations for more or less similar reasons. But now I'd like to hear also the point of view from Austria.
Bardzo chętnie. Ja troszkę to widzę inaczej.
I see it a little bit differently. It's not just the existence of collective agreements that generates conflicts, but the lack of collective agreements. And we see it perfectly in Austria. 98% of workers who are covered by one of 700 collective agreements are obviously the least likely to strike. We have the lowest number of strikes and have had so for many years. So the very basics of the labor market relies on the exchange of interest, mutual interest of employers and employees. And we know that negotiating these interests also in terms of telework has not worked in a balanced way for a long time. So when we look at the Austrian market, what is enshrined by the law was initially developed in collective bargaining. And for many years, this process has taken place not in closed environment in between government members, but between employees and employers who every year sit down at the same table and negotiate working conditions. So this system has worked out perfectly for us. And I believe that the situation regarding telework that we've been observing, so on the one hand, we have an act of law, a piece of legislation, and on the other hand, these rules are made specific in sectoral agreements. There are 700 collective agreements, and not all sectoral agreements contain these provisions, but more and more sectoral agreements do so. So this is the solution that has worked out. And we know that on the basis of the evaluation of this Austrian law. So this is why I see a future as the future in which we have more intercompany regulations rather than less. And I also believe that the recent initiatives at the EU level show us that this is the direction to follow, and we see it as a positive development.
Thank you, Philip. If I may ask, did I understand that you are slowly moving from sectoral level to company level with teleworking agreements?
Tak, więc jest jedna wielka ustawa negocjowana również nie między rządem, ale między rządem i...
So we have a large act that is being negotiated, a piece of legislation that was negotiated between all the social partners. So it's laid down the groundwork. But we have 700 sectoral agreements in Austria. So right now, more and more sectoral agreements incorporate sector-specific solutions regarding telework. Obviously, they are different from sector to sector. But apart from the sectoral collective agreements, companies themselves, by way of works councils that are being elected every 5 years, sit down together with employers and they agree on rules. They don't have to be collective agreements, but rules regarding how many days per week workers can work from home, or for instance, how much they will get as an allowance because they work from home and they have expenses regarding working from home. So we have 3 different levels. We have legislation, national legislation, 700 sectoral agreements for 700 sectors and subsectors, and company level agreements. And obviously, works councils are not present in all companies, but wherever they do exist, they can sign agreements, they can sign company level rules applicable to a company. And as a result, we don't need to negotiate such rules individually, but it is the works councils that have a lot of instruments, a lot of tools, including the right to protect workers against being made redundant, against being laid off. So the Works Council enjoys a much better negotiation position than an individual who depends on the employer, obviously, for his paycheck.
Yeah, thank you, Philip, for a very constructive answer. I would just like to pick up shortly before we go on. Paulina and Nuno, what do you think about this kind of work council? So how dominating role does it have in your country?
In Poland, it's rather workplace trade unions that play the major role. Workplace collective bargaining is the strongest. The sectoral bargaining is not very strong. We consider that trade unions are the most capable organizations in negotiating agreements because they can enter into collective bargaining and can sign collective agreements, binding collective agreements. And we believe that trade unions, workplace trade unions, are the ultimate organizations representing workers' interests because they can collectively bargain, and Works Council in Poland cannot enter into collective bargaining process.
Okay, thank you. Nuno.
Well, we have extremely low level of works councils in Portugal. The ones that exist, they're probably less than 50 or 60. They exist in very big companies, normally publicly owned or formally publicly owned. They function. In some of them, they function very well, not just for information and consultation. But let's not mix the tree for the forest. The 99.9% of companies in Portugal don't have works councils. So this is not a solution to regulate telework. Most companies that have a presence of a shop steward or are already below 15%, and all the others have, I would say, a light contact with trade unions, and perhaps most of them don't have any contact at all.
Thank you, Nuno. Okay, so this topic, I think we could go on with quite long, but I think we are running out of time. But before we end our panel discussion as such and open the floor for open discussion, I would like to know from Maurizio, so if there are any kind of this kind of, how you say, telework arrangements that you see should be improved now, that an urgent, what are the urgent topics in telework arrangement that you find that should be taken consideration?
Yes, thank you. I think that in general, what I see as important and urgent is to find out what are the right mechanisms to make sure that the existing regulation in the area of WASH is complied by the employers. Because, I mean, I agree with what has been said that probably the best option is not to, depending on the tradition of industrial democracy of individual countries, to decide to go for a collectively regulated telework. But from an OSH perspective, as I mentioned, legislation it's already exists. It's a matter of making sure that it's applied and employers comply with it. So find mechanisms that allow for that to happen. Make sure that employers are informed on their obligations toward teleworkers. These are the type of let's say aspects that I see as urgent to make sure that then what exists is correctly implemented in the workplaces.
Thank you, Mauricio. This was a very important point, and I think we can all agree what you just said. Now I'd like to open the floor for possible questions for the panelists. I cannot see if there is someone is online. No hands raised. How about here? Yes, we have one question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's not actually a comment, right, and also involves what Nuno and Maurizio said earlier about the impacts on health, physical and mental health, right? So in the research now, the exploratory interviews, I've noticed that the negative impacts are surfacing within like the first year of telework. So people are reporting already back pain and eye strain and other things, right? So it's not only needed, but is a must now that we start implementing these programs and start talking to companies so they are aware of this issue, and also can start creating programs, comprehensive programs for the employees. Otherwise, we face a greater risk, because if within 1 year you already have negative impacts that are tangible, what about 5 and more years, right? So if Maurizio has something on these lines to share.
Yes, I fully agree. Thanks for the very relevant comment. What we aim to do is actually raise awareness about the fact that these are the risks, and there is something that could be done to prevent them. Employers have a range of responsibilities, and they can use a range of tools that we and other organizations have also developed to make sure that their obligations are fulfilled. Workers, on the other hand, can also be informed properly by other organizations, by the employer itself, about how to prevent the risks, like how to set a proper ergonomically right workstation at home, so on and so forth. So these are the type of let's say advice that it's important to bring towards the employers and the workers. We do our best, and we hope that with the help of everybody, this can change at some point.
Thank you, Maurizio. So, do we have any further questions? At least we cannot see here in the room, or neither online, right? No. Well, in that case, I would like to thank the panelists for your active and collaborative answers, and they were very fruitful, and I'm sure we could go on with these diverse topics much more profoundly if we would have more time. So thank you so much for taking part, and also for Philip and Maurizio, thank you for taking part, and all the audience online and in this room. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.